Hi, I'm Mark Hovey, Producing Artistic Director at Paper Mill Playhouse. Welcome to Babbling by the Brook. You know, over the course of the last few weeks, we've talked to a variety of different people in the theater business, directors and choreographers, actors, even a fight director. But this next gentleman we're going to talk to has the corner on animal training, both on stage, also on TV and film. He was awarded a special Tony, and he's also written a book. And I'd like you to welcome my good friend, Bill Berloni. Hey, Bill, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to virtually see you, Mark.
I know virtually, that's the way we're living now.
Yeah.
I assume you're up on your compound?
Yes. I've been sequestered up here on the farm with all the animals, so it hasn't been that bad.
Yeah, you have a lot of company. And how many animals do you have with you there?
Currently, we have 38. We're down to 38.
Down to 38.
Yeah, 25 dogs and another 23 farm animals, birds, rabbits.
And are they all working animals, or some are pets and some are rescues? What's the makeup?
Well, all the dogs are rescues and they're working, retired, or in training. I have the geese and the rabbit from the ferrymen, so they're sort of retired. I have 2 pigs that were supposed to be in a production of Green Acres. Never happened.
I heard about that.
A couple of horses, donkey, cats.
That's amazing. So you are animal trainer and animal activist of the stars. I want to go back a little bit because you and I first met, actually, right behind me. Can you see the poster that's hanging on the wall?
I do.
I believe it wasn't I Do, it was Nick and Nora.
I know.
And I was the dance captain in the swing, and you trained Astor.
Yes.
And
the last minute I trained Astor because they fired the first one.
Is that, I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah.
I do remember one dog was named Riley.
Yes, he was our main dog.
And then there was another.
His name was PJ, and the stage manager ended up adopting him after the show.
Yes, that was a fun show. It didn't have the greatest run, but I do remember specifically that Astor originally didn't make his entrance until scene 4. Do you remember this story? And the show would happen. It was Joanna Gleason and Barry Bostwick, and they did the whole beginning of the show, and even Christine Baranski had her first number. And then they went home to their apartment, and when the door turned around, Astor was sitting there and got huge applause that stopped the show.
Yes.
And Arthur Lawrence said, this can't happen. So I don't remember if it was your idea or someone's idea, and Astor got put into the staged overture, and then that killed that applause.
Yes. But what the audience probably doesn't remember is not only we had the units that turned, they were, moved on their own. And if I didn't call him off at the exact right moment, he would have been crushed by 2 pieces of scenery.
I don't remember that. I do remember that was a crazy set, a crazy show, all of it. I also remember that there was a time that Riley, there was a lighting instrument in the ceiling that burst, and I guess glass was on the ground, and Riley got a little sliver of glass in his paw and couldn't do the show.
Yeah.
And so PJ had to go on.
Yeah.
And then do you remember what happened after that?
It was a blur. Whenever an understudy dog goes on, it's a blur because, human understudies barely get enough time. Dog understudies, but I think we made some changes and we had some contingency plans. I think he did all right.
Yeah, PJ, and I also remember PJ was a very docile dog, but after PJ had played the role, he growled a lot at Riley because he wanted to get back on stage.
Wanted to get those cookies, get those applause.
Everybody's a ham. Everybody in show business is a ham.
Yeah.
So listen, we know you from your long storied career, training every animal that's ever been seen on Broadway and television and film and all of that. But let's go back to the beginning because you started out as an actor, right?
Well, you could call it that. When I graduated high school, I wanted to be an actor. So I enrolled in a local college to do my core courses and then save my money and go to New York and go to NYU. But instead of spending my summers just hanging around, I wanted to keep learning about theater. So I applied and was accepted at the Goodspeed Opera House in their technical apprenticeship program. The summer after I graduated high school and the next summer. And that's where, I learned about theater and professionalism, and an event happened that changed the course of my life.
And what happened?
Well, the Goodspeed, very much like the paper mill, is dedicated to all sorts of shows, particularly musicals and the American musical. So they always introduce new musicals. And in the summer of 1976, they decided to do a show, and after they advertised it and sat down at the production meeting, they were like, oh yeah, there's a dog in this. So the executive producer at the time, Michael Price, said, well, we'll just rent one from New York. Called New York. Of course, they were very expensive. And so he went to the paid staff, and everybody said, if I have to train a dog, I'm quitting. I mean, the carpenters didn't want to train dogs, the electricians. So he needed a sucker, as I like to say, someone who would be dumb enough to take the job of training this dog. And I remember being called into Mr. Price's office, and you can imagine what it feels like when an apprentice comes into your office. He sat me down in his chair, and I'd been there 2 years, and I don't think he ever really talked to me, complimented me on my work, and turned and said, Billy, how would you like a part in one of our shows and your equity card? I sat there thinking, what a brilliant man. Recognizing my acting ability, by the way, I've been moving scenery for 2 years. He said, yes, Mr. Price, that would be great. He said, kid, all you have to do is find and train the dog for the new show for no money, and I'll give you your equity card. I was like, great, no problem. I mean, it was one of those deals just happened. And it took me a couple days to realize what I had agreed to. And in the summer of 1976, he gave me $35 to buy the dog and feed it all summer. That was the budget. So someone said they had cheap dogs at the animal shelter. Well, I had had dogs all my life. I'm an only child. I'd never been to an animal shelter. So the day I went casting for this dog, I was really hurt. The conditions under which I saw dogs were something I'd never seen before. And I was profoundly moved. And I found this one dog who matched the description. And then I found out he was going to be put to sleep the next day, and I didn't have enough money to adopt him. So I went back to the Opera House that night, got some money, went the next morning before they opened, and adopted this dog. And that dog was the original Sandy in the original production of Annie.
And there you go.
There you go.
And that was the turning point in your life when you moved from actor to animal trainer.
Oh, no.
No?
Oh, no. And the original production of Annie opened at the Goodspeed Opera House and was killed in the New York Times. And oh yeah. And I had already been enrolled in NYU. I was moving to New York that September. Sandy came with me. I was going to be a student with a dog, and actually studied with Stella Adler for almost a year. And then Martin Charnin, the original director, called and said they were producing the show for Broadway. Would I be interested in participating? And I thought, I could use the money and a Broadway credit. And, Charles Strauss and Tom Meehan and Mike Nichols, Dorothy Loudon. Sure, I'll be an animal trainer. So Sandy and I and Andrew Picardo went to Broadway, and this phenomenon happened. And, I was asked to do the national touring companies. All the time, I was taking dance classes with Peter Gennaro. And I was still taking singing lessons, but it took me 2 other Broadway shows to recognize I was probably more talented at this, animal training, than I was at acting. And I mean, all I had to do was look at guys like you who could move and who could sing, and I was like, yeah, I don't think that's my career.
Well, and when you adopted that first dog and for the Goodspeed production, what did you know anything about training animals? How did you figure that all out?
I barely knew anything about theater. I mean, when they said, Bill, here's your first rehearsal, I had no idea what to do. I had never run a rehearsal. But, I grew up on a farm, and my mother tells the story that, well, when I was born, she almost passed away. She had a very difficult pregnancy. So she wasn't keen on having more children, big Italian family. So when I was 2, she asked me if I wanted a brother or a sister, and I said a dog, at which point she ran out and got me a dog. And so from the time I was 2 until I went to kindergarten, this collie, his name was Rexy, was my best friend. And I remember having this very vivid, wonderful childhood. But, kids, if a kid pulls the tail of a dog, they run away. So I must have learned early on that to play dog games, to think how, to figure out how they think and what they like to do. So it was that type of pet relationship that I had all my life. I mean, my dog was never on a leash. All of my dogs, they just liked being with me, and I liked being with them. So when I was given this opportunity, in the simplistic way, I went, well, if Sandy thinks the stage is his home and this little girl's going to feed him some food, maybe he'll go to her on stage every night. And that's what happened, that we created a bond between the kid and the dog. And he was so familiar with the theater that, when it was his turn to go to Annie, I just let him go. He was going on his own because he wanted to be with her. So it was really a method of positive reinforcement based on how I had lived as a child with dogs.
And do you have a count of, I know you've done Annie for us at least twice, but do you know how many Annies, and now you train other people to stay with the dogs as
right.
guardian through the show, but
Yep.
do you know how many productions of Annie you have done in your career?
I don't want to count.
It's
tens of thousands of performances. I have a file cabinet that I just put in the regional productions, and that's up to 153.
Wow.
That doesn't include the 3 Broadway revivals, the national touring companies, so it's probably in the hundreds.
And the movie.
And the last movie, yes.
Right. And that's an incredible legacy, I mean, that show, it's so funny, and pardon the pun, that this underdog of a show, right,
Mm-hmm.
it was sort of knocked out. And I remember, I think it was Michael Price who told me originally when the show was brought to him, and it was a musical based on this little cartoon, and people were thinking, that'll never go anywhere. Why would you invest any time or energy in that? And I think even to this day, it's undersung. It's a great musical. It is beautifully constructed, great music, terrific story, all about love and the creation of family.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the winning element of the dog. And I do know, because we've worked on at least 2 productions of the show together, that you're so keen on that relationship between the Annie or the Annies. The last one we did, we had 2 Annies.
Yep.
And the dog. And sometimes building that relationship is more important than anything else that the little actress learns for the part.
The dog is there because he wants to be. So there's a necessity to build a relationship so they feel safe, so they want to be there. But from a purely directing standpoint, I want the audience to really believe that child loves that dog. We have, 5 lines and a song to create the bond that became Little Orphan Annie and Sandy, because they're soon separated. And so it was always, the kid's natural instinct was to want to play and love the dog, and I just continued to work on that. And it's so simple, it's so beautiful. It's when you see real actors who in real life are in love. I mean, it's a different type of relationship. But when it's a kid and a dog, how do you resist it? It's just really pure and beautiful.
And the thing about it is, the thing that's funny, because I have a dog at home. His name's Milo. He's a little Australian Shepherd Poodle mix. I did not have a dog growing up. I had brothers and sisters. We didn't have space for a dog, but the dog's not acting. Everybody in the company is acting.
Right.
It's their job. But the dog, you can't train a dog to act. The dog is instinctually doing what dogs do. And I guess they know and they can feel when they're loved and when, someone wants to be around them.
Well, and conversely, they pick up on what we're feeling. So if they're with someone who is tense and frightened, they become tense and frightened. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes a relaxation exercise for the actors and the animal, because they have to be calm to exude this feeling that we're okay, And but I studied with Stella Adler, the method acting, and here I picked a career where all my actors are the ultimate method actors. But yeah, but it's hard to then fake aggression, because the dog, how does a dog act aggressively? They don't. They are aggressive. Or how do they act sad? How do they act? You have to I have to come up with ways on film or even in shows to do other things to create that emotion that the audience sees, but not really have the dog feel that way.
And you've done so many shows, and we can talk about a lot of them, but and movies too. But Winn-Dixie is another show that I've seen several versions of that you've been working on. But in Annie, Sandy is certainly an important part of the story, but not the focus of the story, right? It's Annie. And she meets him, they sing a song together, he goes off, and then he gets lost and comes back later. But Winn-Dixie, he's the title character of that book and movie and TV special, and then also the musical. And there's a lot of storyline and, like you're saying, emotion that dog has to convey. So talk a little bit about that project.
Well, I was always amazed that Sandy, who was on stage for 11 and a half minutes, became this superstar on Broadway. I mean, why were people drawn to animal performances like that? And, as I've seen theater take every acting element, stage element, and take it to a new degree, I was waiting for someone to do Benji the musical so that I could train a dog to be the star. And I actually got the idea that I could from the Paper Mill Playhouse. It was the Paper Mill production of The Wizard of Oz that went to Madison Square Garden.
Oh, right.
That I was asked to do. And just like in that show, Toto's throughout the entire story.
Right.
So that was the first time that I started to figure out, how do you keep an animal awake, have enough energy to tell a whole story. And once we did that, I thought, okay, we could take this to the next level. And my wife, Dorothy, found because of Winn-Dixie and became the originating producer. And that was the piece we chose to be able to create the first play that stars a dog.
And it's interesting too, because again, it's the story of a young girl and the dog together. And the father figure is so strong in it. It has a couple of parallels to the Annie story. But that dog is so much more involved. He's a catalyst for a lot of the activity in the storyline.
Yeah. And what's interesting was when Nell Benjamin, who did the book and lyrics, John Rando and Duncan Sheik sat down, they were like, is that dog going to steal focus? We were afraid he was going to steal focus. And I said to them, I know I can keep him still, but the only way to find out is, to try it. And what we did find out was, once the audience went, oh, it's a dog, they went with us, and continued to still follow the story, even though there was the scene stealer sitting there. So it was an interesting experiment, but Sandy had 11 cues. Bodie, who was Winn-Dixie, has 125. And it takes 4 trainers to make that happen. So
4 trainers on stage, or in the company?
2 up and 2 on.
2 on and 2 up, 4 in the company.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we did Annie together, it was one person whose assigned track was, I remember they played the cop and a couple of other things. I can't remember exactly, but then they were also the animal trainer and lived with the dog.
Yeah.
That the dog went
it probably in the 90s, producers came to me and started saying, budgets are getting tight, we can't afford to put someone up. And so I started hiring actors and training them to be trainers so that we could, double cast their role and make it more economical.
Right. And you've been here several times. We've done two productions of Annie. You did Wizard of Oz here.
Yeah.
You did, well, you mentioned earlier Inherit the Wind before we got on this call. But that wasn't a dog.
That was not a dog. Gosh, it had to be in the early 80s. And Inherit the Wind there's an organ grinder who has a monkey on his shoulder, a capuchin monkey. And I never worked with a monkey. And so I called my friend who was the exotic animal trainer for the ASPCA in New York City. And she helped me rescue this 20-year-old monkey whose owner had died. His name was Guido. And he got attached to me, and I couldn't give him to another actor. So they let me play the organ grinder opposite Eli Wallach and Robert Vaughn. So there I was. If you look in the archives.
Oh, I think there's a poster up down my hallway about that show.
So it was a little bit of a foray back into acting, and I was like, okay, that's it. Me and the monkey, we're done. And
that's crazy. And I guess a couple of questions. Can any animal be trained, or to some degree, or I can't imagine training a bird, but or a cat. They seem a little standoffish, but.
These gray hairs, cat training, cats. I'll get a call. Hello, Mr. Berloni. We're doing a show with a cat. Do you have a trained cat? I'm like, there's no such thing as a trained cat. But we've talked to other trainers who have trained cats. I'm like, please hire them. Just go. And ultimately they asked why I talk about it. I said, well, cats are independent thinkers. They have no reason to please man. And how can I sign a contract that's going to guarantee an animal is going to do something when they don't even want to hang out with people?
Right.
So, but I always get the job. And the solution is, and I'll share it with everybody, one cat in 10,000, has atypical feline behavior. They're social, they want to be with people, they're calm, and that's the cat I grab for a show. Because at least they're willing to not act like a normal cat. I did a show on Broadway called Alice in Wonderland with Kate Burton, and she had to carry a black cat on stage, and we found a black cat for that. And then there was this wonderful play called The Lieutenant of Inishmore.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Where a black cat comes on at the end and is the whole ending of the play. And we did it off Broadway. We had this great cat named Mr. Ed. And this is a cat story. People will love this. We had this great cat named Mr. Ed. All he had to do was come out on a shelf and eat a bowl of food with people pointing guns at its head and, people screaming. So we did the off-Broadway run at the Atlanta Theater Company. Perfect. We went to Broadway. We ran 6 months. Cat was perfect every night. But we had 2 actors from London, and their visas were up 2 weeks before the show closed. So the producers are like, well, we'll just put the understudy on. So one night, the understudy goes on in that scene, and I see Mr. Ed look at him with disdain. I'm like, what is he doing? Next night, he wouldn't go out because one actor in that scene had changed.
Wow.
Fortunately, we had an understudy cat, that we put on, and so he was didn't know what to do, but at least he didn't have prejudice against which actors he was working with. I mean, come on. A dog would never do that.
Cats are divas. I'm telling you, cats are divas. Oh my goodness. So, and I wasn't even thinking about it until you said it, but we as actors and performers, we do 8 shows a week. We repeat things all the time, but there's a lot of focus and stamina that goes into that. And when you're talking about an animal, my animal sleeps most of the day, eats, goes outside, that's it. But to do the same activities 8 times a week, that's a lot of pressure and focus.
Oh yeah, part of our jobs as trainers, it's like being an Olympic athlete or training an Olympic athlete, preserving their energy and their thought for that one moment where they have to perform. So, Paper Mill has always been great. You've always put us up in the houses across the street, so that the dogs could sleep and not have to commute, 4 hours a day. So they could just rest and take a couple of walks, and then they come to the theater and all their friends are there. So they look forward to the experience, but keeping them healthy, keeping them not getting too tired, it's a 24-hour job. And
what about the distraction of the audience? Because that changes every night. What noises there are. And we also have, seeing eye dogs come into the building when we have patrons who have sight loss. How does that affect an animal's performance?
Unfortunately, it has a big effect. When we are training our dogs, we introduce them to all those things in the theater. We just don't throw them in. So when we get a new dog, we will usually take it to some performance that's already existing, that's running, and just bring them backstage, and introduce them slowly to the sound of the orchestra and the lights and people moving, and let them hear the sound of the audience. It's a little different the first time they go on. I mean, there is sort of what are you all doing there? But again, if the person they're with they really love, they'll ignore it. But you can't. It's very hard to have dogs ignore other dogs, especially when they come into their space. And knock on wood, the patrons who have had dogs, have either, kept them by their feet or made sure that they were quiet during the scenes that our dog was performing, So it's, there's all sorts of things. But the audience is the variable, actors forget lines, they forget their blocking. One night, Legally Blonde at the Palace Theater, a little Chihuahua has to go center stage at the beginning of the show and start barking. Right. So one night, I let Chico go, and he runs out, and I see him look at the audience and start going towards the edge of the stage. Annalie Ashford, of course, thinking, picks him up, ad-libs some lines, and moves on. And I go over the other side of the stage and went, what was going on? She said, Bill, there were people in the front row eating fried chicken at the Palace Theater on a Saturday matinee. I mean, how do you?
Yeah, you're not going to keep a dog away from that.
No.
Oh my. So then, so theater is one thing, but you've done a lot of TV and film. Film at least must be a little easier in that I bet what you're asked to do with the animals is more complicated, but you only really have to get it right once.
Correct. And a lot, in theater, we have to build that relationship because the audience sees the actor and the dog interacting. In film, I can get the dog can be really tied into me, and I can be behind the camera having it interact because there's no rehearsal really in television. There, it's very quick. Even with film, you have to shoot. So that training, the dog will do 10 times more for me than it will for a stranger. So that's why we just sort of keep the shots lined up so that I'm actually commanding the dog, and the audience is unaware of it. The film audience is unaware of it.
And one other question: what is the? I mean, I think a monkey is a pretty odd animal to have to train. You talked about the geese and a pig. What other kind of exotic animals have you worked with as, actors in film or TV or on stage?
Well, when Annie first opened, I started getting calls for a lot of other jobs. I started going to people who had tigers and people who had lions and all those exotic animals, and I was appalled at how they were kept and how they were trained. People with primates, chimpanzees and gorillas. It was just horrible. So I don't do exotic animals. The capuchin monkey I hadn't accepted the job, and I called my friend and she said, well, I do have this monkey and he is tame and he needs a home. But that was the one time I sort of stepped over into wild animals. So it's anything you could find on a farm or a pet shop. We've done slugs, we've done spiders, we've done snakes, cockroaches, rats. You know, I mean, for the film world, it's anything.
Right.
Anything that, again, small like that. I have a herpetologist who is an expert in insects and snakes, and so he will come and handle them. You know, but on stage, it's been cats, dogs, geese, rabbits, pigs, lambs, and gypsy.
Right.
I think that's about it.
That's a lot.
Oh, pigeon. I did a pigeon once for August Wilson show.
Like a homing pigeon.
Yeah, yeah.
And for all your work, you were awarded a special Tony honor, yes?
Yes. In 2011, I was blessed with a Tony honor for special achievement in theater. By then, I'd been in the business probably 30 years and had done close to 20 Broadway shows, and sort of had given up on the fact that, you know, I'll probably never be recognized by my peers. And so it was a surprise and just something so wonderful that people actually, you know, they had created this category for people who are in the business, our business, who don't fit into any of those categories. Right. Press agents, casting agents, stage managers. And so it's a way to recognize the unsung heroes that aren't always eligible for Tony Awards. One of the highlights of my life.
Well, it's exciting and it's well-deserved. And, you know, not just Annie, but anytime I see an animal on stage, I immediately open the program and I assume I'm going to see your name in it. And normally I do. And you've become such a staple in the theatrical community. So that's well-deserved. And I have to just tell you one thing before we wind down. My dad, major animal lover, dog lover. He was a tough man, sort of that 40s brand of, you know, children should be seen and not heard, and you know, ex-military guy. But his heart broke for animals, you know, and especially dogs. And he had a special bond with the dogs that we had later in life. I said we didn't have one growing up, but he and my mom had some later. And the best gift I ever gave him was a Podograph. Do you remember the Podograph?
Yeah, yeah.
From Nick and Nora, Riley had Podographs, you know, pod signed things, headshots or whatever, that used to give out at the stage door. And I brought that home for my dad once for Christmas that year. He framed it, had it up in his house forever. He loved it. So I'm grateful to you for that.
Wow, what a great story. But yeah, animals are good friends. You know, they give us unconditional love. They don't judge us. They forgive us. You know, so they're fun to be around for sure.
And I have 2 kids now who are not kids anymore. They're 17 and 21. But and Milo is our second dog. I told my son when he was very little he wanted a dog, and I said, well, when you're 10, we'll talk about it. Then I forgot about it. But on his 10th birthday, he said, where's my dog? But it does, having a dog, it changes the dynamic of your family. It's definitely a family member. And like you said, there's a love and a doesn't matter how bad your day is, the dog is there to greet you and kiss you and lick you and just wants to be loved and taken care of. Don't we all want that?
Exactly. You know, and yet for children, it teaches empathy. It teaches compassion, responsibility. Also, you know, loss. You know, how to deal with loss. I mean, so again, there have been children I've worked with who've never had a dog who, you know, when I start working with them, just you can see them discover a whole new part of themselves. And I always tell the parents ahead of time, I'm sorry, but a side effect of doing Annie is you may have to get a dog now.
Good for you. You brought a lot of love to a lot of families and a lot of joy to so many theater goers. And I'm glad we've had, gosh, Nick and Nora, I can't even remember what year that was, 90 something, but we've known each other for a long time. And I look forward to another project that we can work on together and have you back here at Paper Mill. So
yes, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be a starring role either, you know.
Great.
But no, the Paper Mill Playhouse, you know, people think Broadway is the be-all and end-all of theater, but it is regional theaters like the Paper Mill Playhouse, like the Muni, like the Fifth Avenue, who bring theater to everybody else in the country. And to have been involved with a theater that does the quality of work that Paper Mill has always done has just been, it's been my ace in the hole. It's like, it's been home. You know, I can always count on Paper Mill asking me to come back, and, you know, and I know we're going to be treated well and have a great time. So thank you. Thank you.
Part of the family, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. It's been great talking to you.
Great to see you. Can't wait to see you back in New York in person.
I know, in person, in the same room.
Yes. All right.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us today. Come back next week when we talk to Meg Zervoulis, Broadway musical director and Paper Mill alum. See you then.